Welcome to the Alphagenix podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Well, I'm delighted to introduce our next guest, Joe Cohen, CEO of SelfDecode. Welcome to the show, Joe.
Thanks for having me, Ross.
So a lot of people, I'm sure, will be following you already on Instagram. You pop up on mine all the time. Megadosing usually some form of supplements. That'd be cool to go into that. But of course, I think a lot of people are going to know you from your work in epigenetics and SelfDecode. But how did you end up here? What's your story?
So I had like 60 different health issues growing up or throughout the time. And I just didn't like the way that I didn't really have anyone who knew what was going on. And I just realized that the way that doctors were looking at the problem, the way that everybody was looking at the problem was pretty flawed. And so it's like, how am I going to fix all these issues, right? And so I ended up having, like, my approach is data-driven and self-experimentation. So it's just looking at the data, facts, what do we know, doing experiments, and seeing if something works. So that's how I got into it. And that approach has allowed me to get rid of all the health issues and then optimize well beyond that, right? Wow. And yeah, so the journey has been very long and very significant, but I keep on finding ways to optimize more.
Love it. And what were some of the symptoms and the problems you were having then at the beginning?
So I actually have a list of all the issues that I had, but really just like the full gamut, I would say. I had mental health issues, mood issues, mental health, energy, immunity, just down the line. I just like inflammation, pain, whatever, just like bunch of cognitive issues, gut issues. And it was clear that a lot of them had to do with other things, but I would also get sick a lot. It was just like, and that was with being healthy, like eating healthy, sleeping, doing the things that I was supposed to be doing, right? And so something wasn't making sense. And it turns out that I don't think I was a genetic mutant or anything, like just like I got terrible genes and that's that. I just think that like maybe in a certain way my genes were not as fit to today's environment as certain other people in certain ways, right? Mm-hmm. But really there was like a couple issues that then caused a much broader number of issues.
Yeah. And at what point then during your journey did you take all your learnings and think, I can turn this into a business, I can help other people?
Pretty early on. So one thing, for example, was, let's say in 2011, I said I had all these issues, right? And I wanted to start a website, say, look, because when you would search for something on search engines, there wouldn't be a lot of good things that came up in 2011. Mm-hmm. And even now, you search for something, I actually filter out most of the stuff that comes up. I just like do PubMed because I don't I'll either do my own site or PubMed just because I don't trust any of these sources, or they're giving very shallow information, right? So it's like everybody's just circle jerking, the other site. Healthline's copying from WebMD's copying from this site, and it's just like you just search something and they're all saying the same thing, and it's all very shallow, the same warnings and nobody's actually using any kind of critical thinking or doing any deep research. So the first thing was I said there's a lack of deep research in any of these fields. And so I decided that, like, let me start a website that is going to go very deeply into these things, and also like talk about my experiments, which is my approach. Look at the data, the science, but also, I could tell people about my experiments. This is what I did. This is what happened to me. And so I bought the domain for self-hacked. That's what I thought of then. It's like, okay, my idea is like, I'm going to hack myself because, these doctors, they're sick themselves, right? Like you go to, like, all my doctors were quite sick. But one guy had like diabetes. One guy, like, they're all very sick. Like, these guys don't know anything about health. That's for sure, right? And they can't fix themselves. How are they going to fix me?
Yeah, it's amazing how often you see a doctor and they're overweight, unhealthy, and you're like, how can you tell me how to live my life?
Right. And a lot of them are like, they have this like authority complex where like, I went to medical school, and then it's like, well, you don't know the basics about how to be healthy though. If you did, why would you be obese or have diabetes or have all these other problems that everyone else has, right? Like, the doctors are not healthier on average than necessarily like lawyers or any other high income profession, right? They might even be less healthy. The truth is, I might be making that up. I don't know, but I'm just saying based on my observations. I haven't seen a study on it. Just based on my observations, if you just take a group of lawyers and a group of doctors, I don't think you'd be able to tell one apart based on how healthy they are, right? Whereas and they're learning two completely different things, right? So, but I don't want to harp on that, right? The idea is that it was clear to me that I couldn't, I'm not going to figure out what's going on there. But in any case, so I said, okay, let me build this website. So I finally made some big breakthroughs in 2013. That's when I started just doing some blogging. And I just was talking about my findings, like my experiments. I did that for like a year or two, just like I was still in school. So it's, like I wanted to maybe get a PhD or something. So I was, taking some science courses and I was, so I was like, talking about my experiments, doing some megadosing experiments, doing a lot of research, really learning about how the body was working. What do these lab markers mean? What does this mean? What do these genes mean? And eventually I realized like, okay, I need to like really write a lot of in-depth posts. So one of the things that we did was write very in-depth posts about all the different kinds of studies with, clinical trials, but everything out there on a topic, right? Like what are all the clinical trials on a certain supplement or a certain whatever. So that was one thing we focused on. And then I also, during that time, during different periods, I said like I was doing coaching for clients, and I had looking at genetic variants. I was looking at lab tests. So I needed software, I realized, to be able to make sense of these things, right? And I looked out in the universe, and the universe didn't have any software to make sense of lab tests or genetics. And anything that did exist was horrible and not trustworthy at all, right? So for both of them, actually, genetics and labs. So either it just didn't tell you anything, i.e. 23andMe, or it was just complete junk, i.e. the rest of the companies. So either it doesn't tell you something or it's just junk. And this, there's not a lot of lab, companies that take in lab tests, and I just said, and the ones that do are also complete junk. So I just said, okay, this is what I need to be able to help other people, and also it could help make sense of things for myself. So I it was a long journey to build those products and gather the databases and all the research and the scientific research. We really spent over $20 million building all that stuff. And now, we have like a large database, and so we're able to make some recommendations. We're able to intake lab tests, and we're able to give recommendations based on genetics and genetic predispositions. So that's but basically how you're asked how I got here, it was I just realized that labs and genetics were a fundamental part of personalized precision health, right? So if you want to, so basically I was like reading different blogs every week in 2011, and what I realized was like you read one guy and XYZ eating tons of butter worked for him, the other guy eating not eating any butter worked for him. and, then, and then you go to a third guy and and like you just go to every other person and they tell you something else, and it's like, okay, so and my body was like, okay, none of these recommendations are working for me, right? So what I went to seek is, I said, okay, so what's clear is that what's working for me is not, or what's working for them is not working for me, and what might be working for me is not necessarily working for them. So everybody's different. And that's when I said, we need our own method. So first I try to give people better information, right? So through the website. We merged it to SelfDecode now, but just giving people better information. And then I said, there's one thing that you get better information, but you actually need the specific tools in order to see how you're different and see why one thing would make you respond differently than someone else. So, and that's based on genetics and your condition, symptoms, labs, all these kinds of things. So we need to be able to take this stuff in, make sense of it, and give back recommendations. That's why I focused on building these tools, and I'm happy I did, because when I look at the market now, I don't see any legitimate tools out there that are even coming close that can do that, right? There's tools that claim they can do certain things like that, but I've looked at them and it's just complete bogus, right? So, yeah, so that's my passion, and that's where I'm coming from. So it's really like making decisions from a very data-driven approach and things that are personal, because what's very clear is that what works for me is not going to necessarily work for somebody else. And I just had a client actually who was talking about some big influencer, and I said, okay, and I don't really follow a lot of influencers or anything like that, but I said, okay, I don't know about this person, but this influencer is giving them information. But I said, when this person gives you information, do they tell you caveats that if you have this, then do this? If your lab test is like this, then do this. If you have this and that symptom, then do this. But you don't need to do that if you don't have this, right? Mm-hmm. And the person's like, no, they don't make those caveats. It's like one program for everybody. I said, then no, I don't trust anything the person's saying. That's my heuristic, right? Like the shorthand version of, that's my short version of if someone's credible or not. Do they tell everyone the same thing? If yes, not credible in my position, in my opinion, because they're not taking a data-driven approach.
Yeah, well, we talk about this all the time, but all 8 billion of us on the planet look different. We should not be surprised that our insides are different too. Like,
correct.
We've got different color eyes, we've got different color hair, we've got our insides respond differently.
Absolutely,
it's kind of logical, when you think about it that way.
Absolutely, we're all evolved to different environments. We're all, we get so many different. There's so many different variations. Literally 100 million variations between each human, right?
Wow.
There can be up to 100 million variations between each human, and and most 100 million, yeah. There's most of them are rare, but the common ones, there's a million common ones, right? Maybe more than a million, a few million common ones, and then there's the rest of them are rare, meaning like you probably have 5, 10, 20 rare mutations that nobody else has. And that's kind of how we evolve. Somebody's got some funky mutation, and actually it's more, it causes survival in certain, environment, and then you're in that environment and you succeed and everybody else dies. right? And then all of a sudden that becomes more common in the population. But essentially, everybody's got rare variants, but there's a couple million common ones, and these common ones fluctuate based on your ancestry and your heritage and a whole bunch of other factors. But yeah, like you say, there's lots of differences between humans, and our insides are also different, and how you respond to something is going to be very different from. And then also the environments are different. So the environment impacts you in one way, and that can cause other changes. Even if you have the same genetics, like, a lot of people have identical twins, they don't develop the same conditions. They're in different environments. And I mean, there's obviously a strong correlation, right? But a lot of conditions, they don't, for every condition, it's different. But that's how you see how much something is genetic. You look at identical twins and see, like, how much are both of them getting schizophrenia or this condition or that condition. But there's still a fair amount of differences, even though a lot of these identical twins are also growing up in a similar environment. But if you take people growing up in a different environment, and that, so your genes are interacting with the environment. And so if something works for one person, that has no impact on how it will work for you. So how do you know what is going to work for you? You have to look at your data, not their data, right? You look at your genetics, you look at your lab tests, you look at what your symptoms, what your conditions are, what your issues are, and what we're doing is we're taking software to make intelligent, take all that stuff together and give you intelligent recommendations based on that. But the idea is that you need that data in order to make decisions. And if somebody's making decisions without that data, then what are they using, right? They're just using their own experience or experience of a few clients or whatever, which is very, very subjective and not good.
Yeah, you've got that objectivity as well. And I think for a lot of people, they're going to be watching this, and it's perhaps the first time they've ever considered that your genes aren't just your genes, because it's probably been in the last, 15 years or something like that, where we've discovered that your genes can express in different ways. Before that, it was like your genetic makeup is you, that's that, it's fixed. And now we know, as you say, it changes with ancestry, it changes with your environment. But it'd be cool to learn maybe a bit more about that, if you want to delve into that a little bit, for anyone that's thinking, what, your genes can change?
Right. So there's two different things. Your genes, your actual genetic variants stay permanent. What can change is the expression of the genes. So, I mean, like your genes your genetic variants are code that basically tell the body how to work. Okay. Now, that code is fixed. The hardware is fixed. There's no changing the hardware. Now, the software can change. That's the environment, right? And, so you're always going to have that same hardware. You're not going to upgrade to a gigabyte of RAM, just whatever, right? You're going to have the same RAM, same whatever, it's there. But the software, how you interact with the environment could change. And that software, the hardware kind of tells you the overall limitations of the system, of the software. So you can't build software that you're going to say, like, okay, based on the software, we're going to live 300 years now. That's a hardware issue, right? You got to fix the hardware problem. Like that's a pure hardware problem. Like, we're not, our hardware is not like your computer is designed to last whatever, 3 years, 10 years if you're lucky, not 100 years, right? Like, it's going to break down. Same thing is, like, the system is designed to whatever. So you got your hardware, the software is where, and that's what, somebody clicks a certain, you have the user that could type in certain things and interact with the software. And so the environment interacts with the software. And so the genetic expression is the software, right? And that's where a lot of things can change based on what your mom did when she was pregnant, just, generational stuff. It could be, just what happened when you were a kid, environment. And so there's a whole bunch of software changes that can occur. But your genetic predisposition is still going to be the same. Like you can have a genetic predisposition for something, but you might not have it if your software or your environment is, is built in a way that you don't, around that weakness, if you will, right?
Yeah. So during times of famine, like the expression changes perhaps in a population, and then that's passed on through ancestral traits. Someone's hardware might still say they're likely to be insulin sensitive, but actually it's overwritten by the gene expression that goes, no, actually we can't handle that right now because of the past. Is that right?
Yeah, there's many factors for that, but that could be one, meaning like, so you could have hardware that says, if your hardware is really like, hey, your hardware is really designed to be insulin sensitive, you could withstand a lot of software challenges, right? Like, it's like if you got good hardware for something specific, like opening 100 tabs at once, that could withstand the memory issues that 100 tabs will cause.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, but that's for something specific. Usually, like some people have their strengths in one place, weaknesses in another. But generally, at a certain point, no matter how strong your computer is, it's going to break down if you just have like 500 tabs open, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's really like, so you're insulin sensitive. It depends on what hardware you get, the genetics, and that's going to tell you what your overall predisposition is. And then, but there's a lot of leeway there based on the software, what you can do to counteract that.
Yeah. It's a absolutely fascinating area. So what are some of the things that you learned about you, and then what are some of the things that you did that made the biggest difference? Like, was there one particular experiment that you did which just catapulted you forward, or have they been lots of little steps forward?
Both. So I would say I wouldn't ignore the little steps forward, that many little steps that have been done, and then there was leaps. So really, it's very hard to point to one thing per se, because when you make these leaps, it's not based on one factor. You're not like, oh, I got this gene, and then that's when I figured everything out, right? It doesn't quite work like that. You have to take in a lot of information into account. And so what happened is that over time, number one is I was learning more and more, and the software at SelfDecode was getting better. So it was able to process things. I was getting better recommendations from there, actually. But I was able to, in combination with the lab tests and my experiments, I would say that my issues were more complex than the average person, much more. The average person doesn't feel very like they don't have 60 health issues at the age of 20, right? It just doesn't really happen, generally speaking. So I feel like for me, it was more complex. But as the software gets better, the information gets better. And so I feel like, I mean, it's, I could show you just a little bit of, I'll go into it about some, like, based on your question, what were some of the big things, but I want to show you just one thing here. So let's say this is a list of my prioritized recommendations, and I can go through some of these, for example, and show you, like, for example, let's say, okay, so making sure my probiotics was a big one. Fish oil was a big one. If I want to look at what does fish oil do for me, this is a database of clinical trials, and these faces are your genetic risks. If it's red, it's bad. If it's orange, it's okay, or if it's green, it's good, right? So what's happening here is that what we're saying is fish oil is counteracting a lot of genetic predispositions that I have that are not good, or that I've dealt with in the past. Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, and then these are certain lab markers that it's also dealing with. So, small LDL, homocysteine, GGT, and then you could see all these genetic predispositions. And so, mood was a significant thing. Homocysteine is, that's a blood marker. Pancreas inflammation, I've always had higher levels of amylase and lipase. And so that's a marker of pancreas inflammation. And so you kind of just see, like, here's my genetic risks, and then here's all the other benefits of, fish oil, right? That might be of interest to me or might not be, right? You could basically click on it or, find if it is. All these things go to genetic reports. So if you want to click here, it goes to genetic report, shows you the references. Each R here is a reference. So you could see that, but let's say fish oil, I would say was a big deal for me. That was able to lower the inflammation and improve food sensitivities. Same with probiotics. So you could see, like, food sensitivities is not something that there's a lot of clinical trials on. So you wouldn't see food sensitivities here. But you actually, you see here, so like probiotics, good for mood, gut inflammation. And these were issues I had: ApoB, acne. This is a risk in the future. This is not an issue I had, but it's just a genetic predisposition. And you could see pancreas inflammation, strength, and lectin sensitivity here. So probiotics were another big thing for me. And so that vitamin D was significant as well. So that's kind of what I'm saying is, like, zinc was very significant. There was a lot of things that were significant, and then I've been able to figure out why they were significant and what that led to over time.
And have you added all of these things into your daily routine now? Or did you use them for a short period of time and then you've eased off?
So I've done both. I've used them for a while, and then I've also megadosed. I've also used them for a while and done lab tests. And so I was able to see, for example, like, let's say if we take zinc as an example, okay? We can look at zinc here. And you could see the first time I took a zinc test, I was actually deficient.
Yeah.
Right? And it's recommending zinc because because of a bunch of reasons here, but it's saying that it's counteracting these things, right? And let me see something here. So it's counteracting these genetic predispositions, and it's also helps counteract these lab tests that are not optimal, and then these other things that, again, I may or may not care about. So let's see 1 second. Okay, so this is, so all these, I would say that these recommendations were pretty good for me. That they helped me quite a lot, actually. Curcumin was a game changer, I would say.
Yeah.
You could see gut inflammation, mood, and then a bunch of lab tests that, so let's say I say, okay, I've got a higher risk of having higher creatine kinase. I could actually see my creatine kinase in this is my actual lab results. You see them typically high. So, basically you're not able to really calculate all of this stuff in your head. That's why I like that there's software for it. And, all these things are clinical trials. You see, okay, here's the clinical trial, and then there's also a genetic variant in this case that's linked to curcumin having a better effect. So curcumin has been a game changer for me. Omega-3 fish oil has been a game changer. Probiotics, vitamin D, these are all quite significant. Zinc. So actually, these 5 were all very significant.
Big ones for you. How do you generally choose where to get your supplements from, because bioavailability changes, doesn't it, depending on the quality or what it's bound to. So is there a, how do you search for that?
Like, give me an example. Like, you're saying magnesium, there might be different forms of magnesium, and threonate. I mean, there's some research based on what is better absorbed. So like threonate and glycinate would be better. So I focus on the ones that are better absorbed.
Got you. Okay.
There's some research, yeah.
And curcumin, do you take that in a particular form? Is it better absorbed if it's a drink, if it's a tablet?
We're actually going to do so we're going to, I mean, there's a few changes that we're going to do. I mean, one is I'm going to probably at some point recommend what I take, just because, I mean, it's a little bit, we don't want to give people like links to buy stuff because then they're suspicious about the recommendations.
Yeah.
But then people ask, like, what do I take? Like, what do I recommend? But in terms of like herbs, there's different extractions for herbs. So, and if there's, I find that so it shows me here curcumin longvita is 21, recommendation 21, let's say. For this is just this, I'm filtering this based on supplements. I could do dietary, lifestyle, other things, but so it shows that these are the clinical trials done on longvita curcumin, and apparently there's 9 clinical trials. Okay, happens to be that I do best on this curcumin. So you want to look at like what the thing does, and then you try it out and see if it works for you. But in certain, I would say like a lot of times it doesn't matter what kind you're buying. Some people are like, hey, what brand should I buy, or what? Just any reliable brand would be fine. So for example, berberine. I mean, there's dihydroberberine, but honestly, just regular berberine is fine.
Yeah.
But like beta-alanine is beta-alanine. Doesn't matter what beta-alanine. Like, there's no fancy beta-alanines. It's just at that point a matter of like how much you trust the company. So a lot of supplements are just, it is what it is. There's nothing, but some of them make a big difference. What kind it is. So like Panax ginseng is going to make a difference. And that's, it takes research to find which ones are good. I mean, I could tell you which ones I like, but
yeah, we're all different. Yeah. So different for me, different for you.
Yeah, okay, and well, actually, that's a good point. So, like saffron, there's many different extractions for saffron, and it depending on what you want to optimize for. But like, this is a new one that I discovered from the site, actually. Meaning, like, I've taken it before, but I put it in my I just kind of ignored it. But then I saw saffron come up as number 7, and it shows me exactly what it's counteracting for my genetic predispositions. And since I actually care about all these things, it makes me want to take saffron. And then there's the other clinical trials here, and so that's like just a lot of interesting clinical trials there, which I did not guess before I looked at this. I thought like, oh, saffron, maybe there's like one clinical trial. Well, it turns out there's 21 plus 5. There's 26 clinical trials here on, or maybe the less clinical trials, but on all these different markers here. Maybe more, but we're also adding more and more genetic reports every day. So the more we add, the more the system gets better, and also the more labs you upload, the better the recommendations are.
Yeah, of course. That's incredible to see some of those things. And as you know, I sent mine to you before. I did my test a little while ago. There was so much data on there, I didn't quite know where to start. So
you start from the recommendations. Yeah, that's where it is, because that takes into account all of your stuff, and then from there you could go into individual reports if you want. But the way to where to start is just from the recommendations, and then you could filter it in different ways. I don't see I haven't gotten the. Oh wait.
Does it come through?
Oh, connection request. Here you go. Proof. So now you connected with me. Now I could see your information. I see you've got a DNA file, no lab tests. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the recommendations, to be honest. And let me see something here. Did you, let's see. Okay, so I'm looking at your recommendations. And you could, so there is a way to filter based on the recommended, like the things that you care about. It's, to be honest, it's not that user-friendly now, but in a week we're going to get it so it's much more user-friendly. Right now, yeah. So let me share my screen. Just do you care if people look at your recommendations?
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Let me pull this off here, and let's go through it. Okay, so this is, so now these are all, the reason why generic ones come up first, just to be clear, is because they have the biggest impact. So we're not going to tell you to take some like extract from the Amazon rainforest if that's not going to have the level of evidence or the impact that something like exercise is going to have. But you can filter it based on supplements if you want, or lifestyle. For example, let's say this is lifestyle. We were looking at supplements before. You can filter that based on, so exercise is going to be lifestyle. The further down you go, the less generic it's going to get. So you can see like aerobic exercise over here. You can look at the clinical trials that were done. There's a big strength training, right? You could see that you have a predisposition for higher homocysteine. So yeah, I mean, like here you could see your negative predispositions, but you could see them through the lens of the recommendations, which I like. So let's look at the supplements if we want, right? And let's see what happens. So some of them are the same, but some of them are very different, right? Actually, the first 5 seem similar, but then number 6 is different, 7 is different, 8. Like after that, they start to get very different.
Yeah, totally different.
Yeah. Again, a lot like vitamin D is going to have a very strong impact, right? And so probiotics, interesting. You have a predisposition for gut inflammation, eczema, homocysteine. Any of these things you've actually had, or they're just like you feel like you're more predisposed to them?
So when I was in my sort of 20s and 30s, I had a lot of problems with gut. If I ever get stressed, I get eczema.
Okay. There you go. Gut inflammation. You had some joint inflammation?
Yeah, prior to starting TRT, that was a big problem.
Right. And then did you get sick with the flu or?
Not really.
Okay. Did you ever have any weight issues?
No, opposite way.
Okay. So that can, if it's the opposite way, then that means that you may have had some like inflammation driving other changes to occur. So that was more environmental, right?
Yeah.
You check your homocysteine?
I haven't had that checked actually.
Okay, so you want to get that checked because it says you're predisposed to higher levels. So this is kind of how it's going to work for genetic predispositions. This one's an infection, so either you're exposed to it or not. The predisposition could have a little bit of an influence. This one is probably counteracted by the overweight one is counteracted by environmental ones, but it's very clear you said you had gut inflammation, eczema, and joint inflammation, right? What about insulin resistance?
I've never had it tested.
Right. So what's your HbA1c? Have you tested that?
No.
Okay. So two of these we don't know, homocysteine and insulin resistance. 3 of these we know that you had a history of, and then I would say like flu, again, you might not know what's the flu, what's not. Like the infections ones are just going to be what you're predisposed to. And then there's one that's just wrong, mainly because I would say your environment there's other environmental issues that counteracted any kind of genetic predisposition. And what I would do is actually check this report. I'm curious So what I do is I check the quality of evidence. So 3 is good, means it's good, reasonable quality. Okay, you're 81st percentile. You just about made it in there. That's what it is. So it's not like you're, 98th percentile or whatever. I'm going to check some of these reports. But, again, there's going to be some stronger, you have a specific gene is linked to rheumatoid arthritis. So this is the HLA-DQA gene, and probiotic species. These 3 actually help with that. These 4.
Okay.
Yeah. So quite interesting there. And so let's look at some of these things here. Yeah, 85th percentile for IBD, which is like gut inflammation.
Yeah.
And then for the eczema, we're at the 83rd.
I'm going to have a big shopping list after this, aren't I think?
Yeah, I mean, so you start with one at a time and you see what's happening. You test and, you make sure like it's working for you, right? But so out of these, it says in joint inflammation, you have the highest percentile. So weight was actually the lowest out of all of these, but still, again, even if weight was high, you still could, like we said, the environment could have a big influence. Oh, one thing I wanted to look at is how good the quality of evidence. So the quality of evidence for each report could be different. This is a 2. That's something you could look at. But in any case, you still see like, okay, what you could do. So this is the hack that you could use, for example, now. And you won't have to use this hack in the future. We're going to generate your reports. But you could look at all the things you're predisposed to, or just everything, and just favorite what you actually care about. And did you already do that?
Nope.
Okay.
No, I was kind of waiting yourself.
Okay, so you might click favorite here, and say, you see, you have a higher predisposition for HbA1c. Now, you wouldn't have a higher HbA1c if you did a lot of things right. Interesting. More likely to have underactive thyroid. So these are just like stuff that could be true that you want to like look at, right? Because like I said, there's many factors at play here. Lower levels of pregnenolone, that's interesting. Lower levels of T3. Any of these things ringing true here? Lower.
Yeah, I take T3. I take T3 and T4. I've done for 10 years.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. So you can see just genetically predisposed to lower levels. Your VO2 max genetic. Again, this is going to very heavily reflect just how much you work out, though. So genetics is not going to have a big impact there. But
it's really useful seeing it all laid out, and then you can dive into any of them and find the research.
Correct. And then you could also just favorite them. So what I do is like right now, and you won't have to use this hack in the future, but you just click favorites, and then it's going to show you your favorited ones. But since we kind of the reason why it's working differently is you have to favorite the ones you care about. So you see now it's looking at just the ones like homocysteine, gut inflammation, eczema.
Yeah.
And you could see the rest of them. But I mean, the truth is, I'm not going to favorite all these yet. But the point is, like, you could favorite what you care about, and it's gonna, and it's actually gonna change the. Let's look at the results now.
So it like tailors your recommendations then.
Yeah, yeah. Now again, as you're not gonna have to do. This is what so the first three still come up. The resistant starch goes up a lot though. So it's because we favored gut inflammation. Oh, so it's just giving you. So we just didn't favorite enough stuff. So the point is that, but the favoriting feature, I don't want to talk about that much because we're more just going to ask you questions, and it's going to be a lot easier to fill that out. We're not going to work by favorites.
Yeah.
But let's just show all for now.
And I guess the more data you give it, the better, obviously, it interprets.
Correct. And so then,
yeah,
correct. You upload the labs, and then we're going to have you fill out questionnaires. That the more questionnaires you fill out, the more accurate it's going to get as well. So it's an evolving system where you could get more and more information. And by the way, this is kind of what I do for myself, but obviously, like it's super time consuming, and I actually. Like with this, it saves me so much time, right? And it's much smarter.
Yeah.
So
it's
these are your reports. Yeah. So these are the supplements. Okay, so we can look at berberine. The berberine is good for your hemoglobin A1C, insulin resistance, gut inflammation, and even if you don't have a weight issue. By the way, how old are you?
45.
45. Yeah, usually what this means is if you're underweight, if you have an issue gaining weight, and your predisposition to your genetic predisposition is different, what that usually means is that there's some kind of inflammation that is changing your system to make those genes irrelevant. And so, but I'm curious, what your hemoglobin A1C is, and do you have your fasting glucose?
Not handy.
Okay.
I have done it. Well, do it quite regularly, but I don't know what it is right now.
Okay. Yeah. So that's another. I'll show you something interesting here. So like, this is another thing that I highly recommend. So where is this here? So this is my file now, okay? And I can look up any lab that I've ever taken and then get all my results here for the past, since 2012. Nice. Yeah. And so you could see like what is my fasting glucose. This means that these were not in the optimal range. Then I started getting them in the optimal range. This is, I had an infection here. That's why it went up a lot. But, but you could see like that's, if you want to look at my hemoglobin A1C, HbA, here it is, right? You just see it, boom, over time. So like this solves a lot of problems because like, oh, I got to look for it. Where, which PDF is it in? Who knows?
Exactly.
And like go to like, it's going to take you an hour to tell me what your HbA1c is, where you could just, if you upload all your labs, you could just type anything in and in a split second get all your results and then go to the actual page and see how to optimize it if you want to, right? And then also it gets included in your recommendation engine. So it's like just a fully integrated system that, so, but I'm showing this because this is actually like, I heavily use all the stuff that we build, right? Because I feel like I need it. Like, how am I going to manage? I've been taking lab tests since 2012. How many HbA1cs do I have? 14. Like, what, I'm going to go through files and folders from the past 14 years, try to figure out what was what when. Just impossible, right?
Yeah.
And
so you just upload them as a PDF, and then
correct. And so you have two options. Either you could upload them as a PDF, and sometimes they upload really well, and it doesn't require a lot of work, or you can just pay for somebody to upload it for you within our system. Meaning like there's an option there, just like we, pay a small fee and then we upload it for you.
Got you.
Okay. But like, think about it. I don't know, if you have like tons of labs, it might cost you a little bit, like $20 or something, like if you have as many labs as me, but that's nothing for having all your labs in the system, right? It's like, just having 100%. It here, and then it's always here, and then you could always see, like, so I could look at a genetic predisposition and I could say, oh, okay, it says my genetic predisposition is higher. What's my actual result? Here it is. How is this changing over time? I could look at my thyroid hormones over time. So I got 18 results for TSH. And you could see they change. It's not like, you could see it's like going down here, then going up, and then going back down. Like this is, and if you tell me like any marker, name any marker, I could put it in, show you all my results.
Fantastic. So what's next for SelfDecode, and what's next for Joe? What's the plan? Where do you want to get to?
So my idea is like, I spend a lot of time doing research and optimizing my health. And that time is basically, what do I do, right? It's not actually doing it. A lot of it is not, that's time, some of it, right? Of course. But like figuring out what to do actually takes more time than actually doing things. And so my vision is making a system that is much smarter than me. And this is what we're doing now. It's much smarter than me. And that's why I'm using it, even though no matter how much research. But incorporating more and more data. So the next version, and again, we're focusing on this recommendations feature here. The next versions of the feature are going to become smarter and smarter over the next few months. Meaning like you're going to put in data and we're going to give you a smarter result. And we're going to explain. So what I really like about this is like, okay, you say, let's say you ask yourself, why am I even taking curcumin at some point, right? And it tells you all of the reasons. And these are the reasons that I actually care about because I favorited the ones that I care about, right? And there's 42 more topics, okay?
Yeah.
And so then, like, let's say click this. It's also telling you the lab tests and that the reasons why I'm taking it. So the idea is that the next stage, which is going to be out in like a few weeks or a month, is we're going to say, okay, what do you care about, Ross? Like, what do you want to improve? Say, okay, I care about X and Y. Okay, what conditions were you diagnosed with? Okay, maybe I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. So we can tell you, okay, take this thing, or here's the recommendation, because you care about these symptoms, you have these conditions, these are the genetic predispositions it counteracts, you have these labs, and you have these specific genetic markers, right?
Awesome.
And it's just a much smarter system so that you can figure out what to do. And so if you want to see like how my brain works, it's basically like this. It's like, okay, I want to know, okay, this is good for this. Okay, I click on this. It's got the references here. I want to know what the studies were. Okay, I want to look at the report. Let me check that out. There's a genetic variant attached to it. Let me check that out, right? So, but if I just want to see like a quick summary of why am I taking curcumin, it's all right here, right? And so yeah, that's the idea. And right now it's the feature is here. You can use it. So that's what we currently have. It's making it a lot smarter. And, so it's like, fill out this form. And the more you do, the more the recommendations are going to get more accurate. And this is like just very, very data-driven approach. This is not Joe's opinion, right? This is why we have trials, references for everything. It's not my opinion. Yeah. Like for example, it's not my opinion that you have a higher genetic predisposition for gut inflammation. That is true. Now you could say like, okay, how do I know your algorithm is good? Well, we're actually about to publish on it. we compare our results to a bunch of different biobanks to make sure that it's predictive to a reasonable degree. So that's the algorithm. Okay, so now we tell you, according to this algorithm, you have a higher genetic predisposition for gut inflammation. Okay, well, it turns out you actually had gut inflammation in the past. Okay, great. Now you can say, this is what I care about, and you can see your genetic predisposition, and then you could see what are all the recommendations that not only are good for gut inflammation, but also good for thyroid hormones, also are good for a whole bunch of other things that you care about. That is very hard to put these things together without software.
Yeah, no, I love that. And where do you see this? Do you want like 25% of the population of the world, to be able to tap into this? Like, what's the bigger picture?
Well, right now, this is the cutting edge, right? Like, I've seen everything out there on the market, and it's the other stuff is like really extremely weak. They're looking at a couple variants to try to predict something, which is completely bogus, or they don't really have a recommendations database. It's just like, okay, you have this one variant, take a recommendation for this one variant without any trials or any evidence there. So the way that, like, and then obviously there's the conventional medicine, which, is not working very well for chronic conditions a lot of times. And so you have this big field of where people are like, okay, I want to feel better, but I don't know what to do, right? And then they like read one blog or podcast, and somebody tells them, oh, take curcumin, right? Mm-hmm. Well, most likely it's going to be a good recommendation, but maybe there's something that's better for you, actually, right? You listen to some Andrew Huberman, you start some fish oil. And by the way, it's a good recommendation, but maybe probiotics is actually a little better for you. Yeah. The point is that, so but right now this is cutting edge, right? And I think, like, when you have something cutting edge, you have the early adopters, and then more and more people buy into it. So this product right now is health optimizers. They want to use software to make better health decisions, and this is catering to them. I mean, I see this. The thing is that because of how bad all these other companies were doing this stuff, like, there's a lot of companies that claim they do personal health, but you look under the hood and you're like, this is complete shit, right? Like, there's companies that say, hey, we'll give you a personalized supplement. Okay. Well, it turns out they ask you a couple questions. You say, oh, you have anxiety? Okay, here you go. Here's some Rhodiola or whatever. That's like very not sophisticated. Mm-hmm. Whereas this is extremely sophisticated. So the point is that the way I see it is not only that, like, okay, we want to offer something to the consumer world, they can get this. We're actually also working with other companies so that they can tap into the system so that their apps can make better decisions as well. And also practitioners, so that practitioners make better decisions. You notice how you can share your results with me. And so I could see all your results. And now I could see all your, if you upload lab tests, I'll be able to see your lab tests in a second. I won't need to ask you what your HbA1c is. I would just type it in a second. And then you fill out some questionnaires, and I see your lifestyle risk for a whole bunch of different things. And as a clinician, all of a sudden you get a lot smarter. You say, okay, well, I could take all the knowledge that I know and start using software to make better decisions. And, so there's always going to be some things that we don't include, right? One of the things we don't include yet is, like, what medications are you taking, or what other supplements are you taking? So we're not making decisions based on that if we don't have that input. But, the idea is that we get smarter and smarter, and we allow you to make better decisions. So right now, you don't just want to say, oh, it's recommending X and I'm going to do X. We don't know if you're on some kind of drug that might interact with this, right? So it's always good to use a practitioner. But, we're making the system smarter and smarter so that you can just, if you're following the first 5-10 recommendations, likely nothing is going to happen, right? Like, magnesium, But again, if you're on like a blood thinner and you're taking fish oil, you should be careful. So even something that's as common as fish oil, there's always like, but the point is that our goal is to make other health apps smarter, make practitioners smarter, and practices smarter. And this is like very new, cutting edge stuff. So, it took us a really long time to build up this database and the algorithms. And this feature was only launched a few weeks ago, actually. So we have recommendations in all the reports. Like if you look at gut inflammation, so let's look at, this is actually my report. I was off your reports. There's a bunch of other features on the site that I haven't gone into, by the way, but there. So you go to recommendations, you could see every recommendation that has every clinical trial that was done on gut inflammation.
Wow. So it's just an enormous engine of information.
Correct. So these are the recommendations, natural recommendations, not drugs. So non-drug, non-pharmaceutical recommendations that have clinical trials on them, right? And the quality of each clinical trial could be different, but you could see that there's 58 recommendations in this case, and you can click on any of them and get more information. We're populating the database, so we have a lot of information. Sometimes you might see something that doesn't have information now because we're populating the database with we want more recs rather than having all the content attached to it. But in time, all the recs are going to have references.
Brilliant. Well, if people are watching this and they're like, how do I get in touch with Joe? How do I get in touch with SelfDecode? Where would you point them? Straight to the website, or is there somewhere better they can go?
SelfDecode.com, and I would recommend them getting a genetic test or uploading an existing one. They could follow me at Mr. Biohacker on Instagram. I have a podcast as well. So the Joe Cohen Show.
Awesome.
And,
I wasn't sure whether you were going to have a shirt on actually today when you joined us, because often I see you online. You've got your top off.
It's a coin flip. Definitely a coin flip.
Fair enough. Maybe next time.
Awesome.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been fascinating to dive more into SelfDecode, where it's come from, where you're going. It's way more comprehensive than I even thought it was. And thank you so much for getting into my results there. So I'm going to upload my labs tomorrow, get some more personalized recommendations, and go from there.
Awesome. And check back every couple of weeks, because that recommendations feature is going to, every 2 weeks, it's going to have a big update that you're going to see better and better results. It's going to be cooler.
Brilliant. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Joe.
for having me on.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.